Lori Vallow Daybell is awaiting her next trial for her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. She's already been convicted of murder, and she is a self proclaimed prophet. And apparently now she is a self appointed lawyer. I guess Lolo's going solo. But as she prepares for her defense in Arizona, she's already bringing the drama. And we're seeing a new side to Lori. As she sat shackled the other day in her court hearing, she was wearing her do it yourself ring. I think it was made out of a hair elastic, from what I recall Nate Eaton saying a year ago. But she was already throwing snark to the judge, and I'm going to be here for it, just like I was for Chad Daybell's trial and his circus. So now let's get into it. Charles Vallow, Lori's fourth husband, was murdered on July 11th, 2019 by Lori's brother Alex Cox. He claimed it was self-defense, but shot Charles in Lori's home the morning of July 11th. And a whole host of issues, a whole host of lies, and some pretty erratic behavior by Lori happened that morning. Now, Lori is charged with conspiracy to murder Charles Vallow. She thought that she was going to get $1 million from the life insurance policy, but a few months before, Charles felt like there was something wrong, and he changed the policy to his sister Kay Woodcock. Lori wasn't very happy about that. So in the court hearing the other day, there were a few topics that were brought up. The cameras. One camera is going to be allowed in the court. And this is great because we can all watch together and obviously be all part of seeing Lori go down. So they're going to do that questionnaire March 24th to the 27th. And then on the 31st, jury selection begins. And April 7th is the opening statements. And May 11 was actually a deadline for a trial completion of Brandon Boudreaux. And Brandon Boudreaux is Lori's niece's ex-husband, who she's also charged with conspiring to kill him as well. So we're going to see what happens there. There's a lot of snark in the court, of course, by Lori about that. She was really ticked off that she couldn't have the discovery in two. She was mad because they combined it in one.
Not to mention that they did combine all the discovery into one case. They didn't give me two different separate discoveries for two different cases, which would be much more convenient considering the voluminous amount of discovery that they piled onto us.
You know what? Work for it a little bit, Lori. That's my own opinion. So she's representing herself because apparently she's got better skills than the other professionals. She does look like she's been studying a little bit, but I don't think she's going to be able to handle her emotions. We already saw in this recent hearing that she started off her sweet ways, as we see Lori, smiling and pretending to be jovial and smirking. That's her part of her too. But we did also see another side, and she is feisty. And I don't think that the judge, in my opinion, is going to put up with it. He did do a little bit of pushback. There's one quote in there that was great by actually the state. I'll read that in a minute. But her snark mode is definitely activated. One of her complaints was that she complained how her cameras were on her in the last trial. Well, newsflash, you're the defendant. Cameras are going to be on you. But it's okay. It's going to be fair. Let me know what you think. But she always brings the drama, so it doesn't matter if it really is 1 minute on Lori or 4 hours or 8 hours on Lori. She's always going to bring the drama. Remember, we've seen her in court. She literally looked like she was in a pageant in one of her hearings. That was a while back. I think it was last year. And it literally looked like she was going to like wave, kind of thing, the hand, wrist. It's normal for her to behave this way, but I think we're going to see a little bit more manipulation from Lori. I think we're going to see her true colors come out because she has to. She's fighting for herself. She's delusional, not crazy, delusional in ways that she believes she's going to be exonerated. I did see little snippets of the Dateline. I didn't get to see all of it, but I saw little snippets of her talking about how she believes she's going to be exonerated and that she saw from Jesus that she was in a spot that wasn't behind bars. Well, you know how I feel about that? I think it's because her visions in her head is actually because she's dead. I don't think that she's going to get out. She's given life sentences already. We'll see what she gets for Charles Vallow. And ultimately also Brandon Boudreaux. We'll see how that'll go down. But she's definitely thinks that she'll be exonerated, her and Chad Daybell, because she saw that there were no bars. Well, yeah, I think it's because you're going to fulfill your whole life in jail and you're not going to end up getting out. So therefore, what you saw is not exonerated. You're dead. My opinion. Let me know what you think below. Now, interestingly, Lori was talking about receiving communications and email, but she said these important words in the hearing, saying something about what the state is hiding. She wants to know is what the state is hiding and turn over whatever's left.
Yeah, we received 6 email communications, and they were in a short time frame, not the full time frame. And it seems to me that in the last email ends in kind of a question that was probably answered, and then there's like no more communication. So it doesn't make sense that there's no more. We asked for all of them if they could be provided to us. We don't understand why they're not being provided to us, and what the state is possibly hiding at this point, and they can't just turn it over so that we can go through them. It's been, long over a month since we filed that motion, so we would just like them to please turn over whatever they have left.
Found that interesting. She also wants the body cam footage. She wants the interrogation footage of Lori with Tylee and Melanie Gibb. And she said, I didn't realize we were being filmed, but we were being filmed. So she's angry. So the snark was happening as the hearing was going through. If you haven't seen it already, by the 1 hour mark, she was bringing it on. She's miffed that it's online and she hasn't been able to see it yet. There was some weird stuff talking about Alex Cox's statements and Tylee Ryan's statements. And she said, I was not there. I do not know. When the judge was asking about Alex and what he said, because he said, I don't know what he said. And she's like, well, I don't know, but I was not there. That's because Lori was off to go to Burger King to go get fries and Sprite before her, or chicken fries or whatever, I don't even know what they're called, before Lori took JJ to school. And JJ Valow, he goes to school after this whole altercation, murder, and Tylee's also in the car giving her time, meaning Lori, to discuss what to say. So it was interesting. I have a whole playlist on Charles Vallow way years back that I did it. And you can see that either at the end of this video or I'll put it below. But check it out because I go in detail about this. There's a couple more things I want to tell you that I have in there, but we'll talk about that in a moment. When Lori talked about Tylee's statements and Alex's statements, it was interesting because the state picked up and said, obviously the defendant has been found guilty of killing Tylee. And she said the defendant can't benefit from killing a witness and then later trying to bring in their statements to their benefit.
The only further thing I think that the state will bring in is that obviously the defendant has been found guilty of killing both Tylee, other individuals, but in this case, the defendant cannot benefit from killing a witness and then later try to bring in their statements for their benefit. So in addition to none of her statements being admissible under the rules of evidence, as any of the exceptions that the defendant has done, we also believe that it would be improper for her to be allowed to bring them in under that theory.
In other words, there's been a judicial finding that the reason Tylee's unavailable as a witness is because of the defendant's actions.
Correct, Your Honor. There has been a jury trial and she has been convicted of that.
All right.
So obviously the reason why Tylee's unavailable is because she can't speak for herself because she was murdered. And not only that, was dismembered and burned and put in the pet cemetery. Also, the same with JJ being killed and put in Chad's backyard. So too bad for Lori. This is interesting too, that Lori's going to be fingerprinted, getting her DNA, and then they're going to put it through the process to see if there's anything else that hits in the database. I hope it does. At this point, 5 years and all her antics, can't wait to see her go down yet again, and this time for Charles Vallow. So this was interesting too, that she has her expert who's in phone and digital expert. We'll see about that. The trial is going to be up to 6 weeks from what I understand. They first were going to say 3 weeks, but Lori's representing herself. And then Lori wanted to remind the court about May 11th being the deadline and for her to have the speedy trial when it comes to Brandon Boudreaux. But I loved that the judge pushed back. Well, you can't have two trials at once, so there's that. Speaking of the judge, Justin Beresky, he assumed office in 2018 and his term ends January 1st, 2029. I like him so far. Tell me what you think about him. I like him so far. I think he's going to be obviously fair. He has to be. But I think he's going to push when he needs to and not. It should be interesting. I could only imagine from the judge's point of view watching defendants defend themselves, especially in a murder trial. That's pretty gutsy, but don't forget, Lori believes she's a leader. Lori already thinks she's a leader. Lori thinks she's going to be exonerated, and Lori thinks that she has to do it herself. In order to have it done, she needs to do it herself and not the others, because obviously she's already been to trial. She didn't get off when it came to Tylee and JJ and Tammy Daybell. And so now she's like, if I have to do it, I'll just do it myself. And speaking that too, there was one thing in the Dateline episode I saw, one of the clips where she was saying, I was not there. When Keith Morrison said, well, were you there when they died? And she went, I was not there. She might as well have went, yeah, I was there that day. She eye blocked and was like, I was not there. Yes, you were. She knows it. And her cockamamie stories about Tylee and JJ and this and that, she's telling some new stories. It doesn't even make sense, and it doesn't even align properly with the timeline. So we know she's full of BS. Surprise, surprise. Now, when they were talking about the two trials, Brandon and Charles, and how it can't be in the same thing or in the same time, the prosecution said, well, like that's going to be a lot of work to try and get everybody together while this trial's going on. She just said, well, the court can figure it out. Like, give me a date. Can't both parties send out the subpoenas now for May 12th, correct? So it's just very interesting. There's going to be a part in May that is going to be dark. They talked about, which looks like it's going to be the third week of May. But if it starts in April 7th, we're looking at mid-May to be done. Maybe this will go faster, maybe not. Let me know what you think down there. But she is allowed to go to the podium to, approach the witnesses. But when it comes to the exhibits, she has to have her advisory council bring it. Now, this is going to be interesting to me because think of Lori approaching these witnesses and asking questions, and the witnesses having to deal with a lot of her crap. It's going to be hard. I think it's going to be difficult in the sense of, I guess, maybe keeping things together, especially if there's emotion involved. And we don't know what she's going to look like. She might have her snark with her clown makeup on, and she might be, just depends on the day. She's very, 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 very manipulative, which brings me to my next point, the timeline of the day. But in the early morning hours of July 11th, at about 6 o'clock to 7:30 in the morning, Chad and Lori exchange multiple messages, but they were deleted. And then Charles arrives at Lori's home, ready to pick up JJ to take him to school. Charles had just arrived the day before from out of town, from Houston, and he gets a text from Adam, who's Lori's other brother. And Adam warns Charles that Lori and Alex are planning something. Now, Alex stayed overnight the night before, and I had it in other videos that we now know what happened. But at the time, we were seeing, well, he slept overnight the night before, and he was sleeping in, I believe it was Tylee's room, just all kinds of weird stuff. Now, the shooting happened about approximately 7:49 a.m. When I did the timelines, we didn't know yet when he was shot or what was happening. But I said, I was piecing the timeline together going, something's not right. I think there's an hour in between. You got to check it out. Anyways, so at the time of the shooting, Charles goes to pick up JJ. Charles gets shot, but his phone leaves the home. And there was chitter chatter from Lori. Lori and Charles were running around with her phone because he didn't want her to have it, blah, blah, blah. Whole story on that. We'll talk about that later. But the police estimate that he was shot around that time at 7:49. And then Alex doesn't call 911 immediately. Instead, he calls Lori to chit chat. And he speaks to Lori twice on the phone. Lori left, apparently, and took Charles Vallow's rental car and his phone. JJ and Tyler are in the car. She goes, stops off at Burger King through the drive-through, and then she decides to stop by a Walgreens, I believe it was, and got some flip-flops. And she drops JJ off at school. And then finally, Alex called 43 minutes after Charles was shot and calls 911. Now, after Charles was dead, they find out in forensics, they found out that he was actually shot on the ground the second time. So while he was laying there. And we know, and if you don't know, Charles was deemed a zombie in the months before leading up to his death. And they called him Ned and Ned Snyder. So it's ridiculous, but that is what they were doing. And Lori was cheating on Charles. Lori was cheating on Charles with Chad Daybell, but Lori was accusing Charles of cheating on her. And the manipulation before was bananas, pretty much. Lori stole money out of his business account. Lori effed off to Hawaii without JJ for 66 days. So JJ was without his mom, and she just didn't give you know what. So she also stole Charles's truck while he was on business. She also took everything out of the house and got rid of all his belongings right down to his underwear. So this is who Lori is. I don't care if a bunch of people, well, we know now, but at the time they were like, oh, Lori's so sweet. No, she's not. She's manipulative. So after that was the 911 call, and we heard that, that was just ridiculous. Alex didn't want to do CPR on Charles, but the 911 operator's like, okay, are you doing it? He's like, yeah. First he said, I don't want to do it. Then he said, okay. He didn't end up doing it. I also had, at the time, my ex-husband was doing the video with me, or he was talking to me about it and was saying, yeah, like that's from his paramedic perspective that he didn't do CPR. Then we later found out, yeah, he didn't do it. So then Lori comes back from dropping JJ off, and that's where we saw her on the side of the street, smiling away, flirting at the cop, and saying, hi, neighbor, sorry, and all that, which was so weird. We saw Alex Cox being interviewed on the curb, also with a little boo-boo on his head. And remember that Charles Vallow has experience as a semi-professional baseball player, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time, but that's what it was. And he wouldn't just have a little boo-boo on his head. They all go to the cop station to get interviewed. And one of the detectives said that was the most weirdest transport from the house to the station that morning. That was Alex Cox, Tylee Ryan, and Lori Vallow. And he said it was super weird, which we later know now why. Later in that day, remember, we heard Chad Daybell calling the mortuary, which I have a video on there too. I'll put all this stuff that's relevant in the description box. But Chad called the mortuary that day under a fake name and inquired about his uncle and cremation, and he called himself Chad Daybell. Note, there was a bat that was involved that day. Without going into too much detail, there was a bat involved, there was an altercation, this is the self-defense, blah, blah, blah. So Charles calls the mortuary saying, yeah, I'd like a ballpark figure, please, for cremation, and it's Chad Daybell. It's just part and parcel of this guy being an idiot. There were reports after that happened later on that day that Lori decides to throw a pool party at her house just hours after her husband of 15 plus years, was lying on the ground deceased and murdered. And she had no problems about having that little pool party. She ends up telling her son, Colby Ryan, that Charles just had a heart attack and died. Alex claimed that Charles attacked him with a bat, but Charles' fingerprints weren't even found on it, and Alex obviously only had the little boo-boo. Lori was inconsistent about being home, surprise, surprise, and detectives note that neither Lori or Alex ever checked on the investigation. Now, notable, Charles Vallow has 2 grown sons, and Lori doesn't tell them that their dad died until a day later and texts them Like, sorry, boys, your dad's dead. We can't forget these little details because the truth is in the details. This will be interesting in trial. Lori may not have John Pryor's lupidity, as he calls it, but she will bring just as much ridiculousness into the courtroom, I believe. And I do believe it's going to be a disaster, but I am here for it. So if you want to watch with me, open arms, welcome, welcome. We'll do the live streams that we can. Speaking of live streams, that camera's supposed to be a 1 to 2 minute delay. So hopefully everything's going to go as planned and I'm going to be able to stream that. Now, one thing to check on, and I got a lot of flack for this when I first did this video, but I still maintain this, is the coded message that I did a video on. And it was basically Lori sending a message to Chad. And it was a setup basically so that Chad can come to Arizona. And I believe I've always maintained that it was a coded message. Now, when one of the trials, it was Chad's or Lori's, they actually confirmed and said that a lot of these were in code. So I still maintain this coded note video. Check it out. You'll see that there's even the whole baseball reference before we even knew about the mortuary and the Daybell and all that. Or maybe it was the same time. I got to look back on my the dates, but I still maintain it. I think that she was inviting Chad to come out to get it done. Also, I did a video on Julie Rowe, and Julie Rowe was also a believer in the end of times and part of Chad Daybell. She worked for him and she had some strange things happen. And she also did a weird coded, I guess, voice message. And my comments went bananas on this. I still maintain there's something weird about that, about Independence Day. I think Lori was trying to get Chad to come the week before and things went haywire. And even Julie Rowe was talking about Independence Day. I think they were trying to do something around that time and something didn't work out. And it ended up being Charles being murdered on the 11th, but I think he was supposed to be murdered before, in my opinion. Check that out. And you can check out the whole playlist on Charles Vallow right here. There's going to be more. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again.